My faith journey and my experience with religion is interesting. I was raised in a family where my mother was a Methodist, and my father really didn't go to church. And so our attendance at church was pretty sporadic as a kid. My parents, I can remember getting dropped off at Sunday school at the Methodist church, but they didn't go to church. They just dropped me off, and I went in. And so that was kind of my first experience with religion, if you will. I think my first real encounter with Jesus occurred when I was 8 or 9 years old, and neighbor next door invited me to go to a Bible camp. And at the end of the camp, they gave you an opportunity to say the Jesus prayer and commit your life to Jesus. And honestly, there was a little bit of fire and brimstone in the camp, and so there was a little bit of an element of maybe fear. But I remember really distinctly, sincerely praying that prayer and wanting Jesus to come into my life. I don't, really think of having another real encounter like that until I was in high school, and a friend of mine on the basketball team decided that he wanted to become a Christian. And he asked a couple of guys he knew that he thought were good guys, not necessarily religious guys, if we would join him on his journey, his faith journey. And so that meant like going to all kinds of different churches and attending, them. And we went to, Pentecostal churches and Methodist churches. We went to a Catholic church. A guy we knew was Catholic, and he took us to church. He wanted us to have like the primo experience, so he took us to the Basilica downtown. And honestly, it was super intimidating. And we were Methodist by nature, I guess. So we were used to this thing where you go up and you take communion, but you had it in your seat in the pew. And so we got in line and we went up, and my buddy was in front of me, and they gave him the host, and he turned around to go back to his seat because we were, Methodist. and all of a sudden, all these ushers appeared out of nowhere, and they're like, "You must consume it here." And it was very kind of intimidating. And so at that time, my experience with the Catholic Church, that was it. My next encounter with faith, though, was really kind of a non-denominational evangelical church that this guy and I connected with. And it was a real seeker church. The music was great. The guy was a professional musician out of LA. And it was a great, really spirit-filled environment. I mean, there was like a Wednesday service where people prayed over people, and there was healing and speaking in tongues. And that was my next really great encounter with the Holy Spirit. And it was transformational. I really felt the Spirit in that encounter with that place. Having said all of that, my buddy and I, after we went there for a couple of years, there just seemed to be some depth or something missing. And I remember at the time, because I had some exposure with the Methodist Church, that it was there was no like liturgy, if you will. Like, we didn't celebrate Easter at this church. There was no symbolism. We met in an old liquor store, So it was there was just something missing for me. My first real encounter with the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church came through my roommate in college, who ended up eventually studying for the priesthood, as a matter of fact. But he had a Bible study, and he invited myself and some other people. And it's actually where I met my wife, was through this Bible study. And I started going to the campus church. It was a very dynamic church. It was the Paulists ran it, and they were very much oriented towards giving great homilies and sermons, which I was used to. And it was a great experience. And eventually I asked my wife to marry me, and part of the deal was that we were going to raise our kids as Catholic. And, as a Methodist, Methodist theology isn't too stringent, so deciding to go and having our kids raised as Catholic wasn't too much of a stretch for me. And I really liked what I'd seen in the Catholic Church. And then I had this incredible experience in a sacramental way. And I would say that was a huge turning point for me, and it was my wedding. It was an amazing experience, like, just spending the time with the priest, preparing to get married, with the other Catholic couples. And then the actual wedding itself, I just felt like I was home in a way. It was just an amazing thing. And I would say, just talking about my journey, I feel like I have more of a Peter experience than a Paul experience, and I'm always envious of people that have Paul experiences where they have this dramatic change. Mine was more like a journey of milestones. So I didn't join the Catholic Church after I got married, and I had a lot of questions about the church, and there were things that I seemed to feel like, I had questions about certain doctrines and things, but I kept going. I kept going to church with my wife and then with my kids, and then we moved out here to Washington, and I had an incredible experience here as well. And it's when it all came together for me, and I would consider myself a Catholic from that point on, and that we attended a Western Washington Charismatic Renewal conference. And I'll never forget being in the Mass, and there was a super charismatic priest from Spokane. And I actually felt the Holy Spirit. There was a part where they asked the Holy Spirit to descend. And actually, the back of my head felt warm, like flames almost. And it just hit me that the Catholic Church had it all. Liturgically, it was awesome. This priest gave a great homily. The Holy Spirit was there. And I didn't realize that until I was there, that it had all of the components of the Protestant churches and so forth that I loved, but the liturgy and the history and everything was there, and it was the perfect package. It was everything.